Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks for hanging on there another minute or two while we wait for everybody to get here. My name is Ian Alexander, and I head up marketing for telemetry. And I am joined by Stephen Schwander, who heads up our client solutions group. Good afternoon, Stephen. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. Good to be here.
Good. It's morning for me. Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are in the world. Thanks for joining us to talk about healthcare recruiting trends and strategies. A little bit of housekeeping up front. Please ask questions as we go along. We typically get to those questions at the end, but if they're appropriate to the conversation, we'll definitely pick and choose which ones we'll integrate into the conversation. So as you get a question, go ahead and use the GoToMeeting chat question module that should be on the right-hand portion of your screen. And just an overview of telemetry. Telemetry provides an award-winning recruitment marketing platform that supports all your recruitment marketing functions, everything from distributing jobs to job boards, social networks, and recruiting agencies through to candidate relationship management, allowing you to centralize all your sources of candidates into a candidate relationship management system and engage those candidates over time. Followed by a career site platform that allows you to deliver online experiences that are consumer quality, that replace your ATS career sites and applications, and give you mobile and social optimized candidate experiences that increase your conversion rate. And underneath it all is an analytics platform that lets you understand the results of everything you're doing to get more candidates and allows you to do more of what works and less of what doesn't work. So that's telemetry. Today, though, we're talking about healthcare recruiting trends and strategies. Just to take a look at the agenda, we're going to start talking about a few key current trends for healthcare. As I'm sure everybody on the line knows, since we created this presentation, we've had a new president-elect, and there's probably some work to be done on the horizon in terms of where healthcare is going to fall and what changes are going to be made. But from a recruiting standpoint, I think we're dealing with some pretty solid trends here that will continue no matter what future reforms may hold for us. But we'll talk about those trends. We'll talk about new strategies to get out in front of those trends. These new strategies require structure. So we'll talk a little bit about structuring for success in a difficult environment, some key practices, and then we're going to give you a quick look at telemetry at the very end so you can kind of see how technology kind of supports some of these strategies. So we talk about trends in healthcare recruiting. The sort of the overarching one is it's projected that job growth is going to be 26% over the next 5 years. And these projections come from the George Washington University Health Workforce Institute. And when you look at the next 5 years and that kind of job growth, the result is going to be that 1 in 8 jobs in the United States are going to be in healthcare by 2022. So that is a huge portion of the workforce. And obviously, it's not easy right now getting the right people in the right jobs. So the projection is that it's not going to get any easier. And in fact, it's going to get more difficult. When we look at that, the largest segment of that job growth is really coming from non-hospital jobs. So value-based healthcare policies are really pushing care outside of hospitals, and jobs like home health aides, physical therapists, by the way, jobs that are already fairly impacted, are the kinds of jobs that the growth is going to come from, rather than extreme growth in terms of hospital jobs and hospital staffing. So you might say, great, well, it's going to get easier to hire nurses. Well, unfortunately not. So the same study shows that there's going to be continued demand for nurses, and that's coming from a couple of different areas. One is, sort of pushing duties away from doctors more and more is driving those responsibilities to nursing staffs. So that's driving a portion of the increased need. And then, as we all know, sort of baby boomer retirements continues to be a factor. And the projection is that the sort of nursing field and nursing jobs is going to grow by as much as 800 plus thousand over the next 5 years. So more difficulty, increased difficulty in getting the skills that you need from a nursing perspective. And it also points out that much of this growth is in sort of advanced practice nurses, so LVNs, LPNs, et cetera. So continued demand for nurses. So it's sort of more of the same there. Similarly, in tech, obviously tech is a big driver of job growth in healthcare, and what they're seeing there is that a lot of technologies that have kind of been perfected and used in the corporate world, in the consumer world for a while, are going to be more and more needed within healthcare. And that's things like patient portals, video conferencing tools, these kinds of standard technologies and approaches that have been perfected elsewhere are going to be more and more important in healthcare. And so that means pulling jobs and candidates out of the sort of corporate sector and drawing that talent into the health care arena. And sort of a byproduct there, since we're all sort of focused on healthcare HR, personally, from an HR standpoint, from a career standpoint, it's projected that HR professionals who have that technology, that data background and analysis skills, and those workforce planning skills are going to be highly important as healthcare embarks on this transformation and continues this transformation. So from a career standpoint, the more sort of technology, data analysis, and workforce planning skills that we as HR professionals can acquire is going to make us more valuable in the future. So kind of the overarching message there is things are not going to get easier. In fact, things are going to get more difficult, and using sort of the same approaches to recruiting that have been successful in the past, it's going to be difficult to scale that. So sort of the new challenge that we're talking about here today and that we see in the marketplace is a radical shift towards more proactive recruiting. And so we define proactive recruiting as a strategy that emphasizes proactively identify the talent you need ahead of the need. Yes, at the time of need, but also forward looking in terms of identifying candidates that you want to stay in touch with and manage over time so that you're able to meet this increasing demand in a predictable way. So, Stephen, why don't you dig a little deeper into this new approach and kind of talk a little bit about relationship-based recruiting?
Yeah, and this is a new approach that has been building, frankly, over the last couple of years, and it's it's primarily because the old approach wasn't working any longer, right? So if you think about the left-hand side as sort of being that old approach, sort of a funnel approach to recruiting, if you will. So you capture a number of leads, probably into the hundreds, in order to find maybe dozens of qualified recruits. Bring them through a skills, assessment and selection and assessment process, maybe to find, just a handful who, are likely to meet the requirements, only to hire probably one person, right? And then what happens is we typically forget all about the funnel. At that point, we start over again with another 300 to 500 leads for the next open position. And so over the course of the last couple of years, primarily through the use of some internet tools, we've started to see more of a relationship-based recruiting process, right? Where we're identifying, groups of people who may be relatively qualified for roles, and we start to build relationships with them so that when the time is right, the right person for that role is more readily available to us than if we start all the way from scratch. So it's really building relationships with qualified people. I typically will talk about rather than finding the needle in a haystack, really generating relationship with the haystack. So when the time is right, the right needle pops out for your opening, and then you still have that community of people to reach out to for your next opening. So much more of a relational based approach. So how do you begin to develop that relational approach? Well, a couple of things that we're going to dig into here. Number one is centralize your talent, getting all your data into the right place. It's segmenting it, building pipelines of that data. Then it's engaging the data, the talent in that data, the people in that database. And then it's sourcing them for specific open roles, and then you want to analyze and optimize that process over time so that it continues to deliver results for you. So let's dig into this just a little bit. From a centralized talent perspective, as you know, particularly if you have a larger organization, your recruiters are using several different tools, several different databases. People are coming into your organization through, direct to the career site, applying for a job. They may have read an advertisement on a pay-per-click banner someplace. They may be coming into your ecosystem because you had an agency working on, doing data research, right? You may be running email campaigns from, an email system. You might have posted your jobs to job boards. You may even be pulling candidate data from job board databases, right? So you have all of these sources of potential talent. And then internally, you've got employee referrals, people that are saying, "Hey, my cousin just got her RN. She'd be a great fit for our organization. Here's her resume." Or internal candidates that are, getting themselves educated and qualified for new roles, right? So all of this data you have, and it's all great data, but unless it's in one place, you can't start to build a really strategic process for sourcing out of this pool. So you want to make sure that in one database you can find all of your past applicants. You can find all of your downloaded resumes from third-party databases and even the open web and LinkedIn, et cetera, right? Any contacts that are coming in from social networks, and then anything that, folks that are applying through job boards, and have all of that data in one place. So you have to look at your process. Say, how is this data coming in? How are we capturing it? If they apply to a job, are we then automatically bringing that data into our CRM? If they're, hitting our site but they're not applying, do we have a quick way to get them into the CRM? So you want to grow that centralized talent pool, right? So here's just a quick view of a rather boring client. It's basically just my demo data. But can you imagine if you had a process in place in your organization to grow your talent pool so that all data was hitting into your CRM or your centralized data? You would see a continuous increase in the number of people represented by that green line on the left. And again, from all of those sources that I talked about before, in addition to some things that I didn't talk about, like a talent network where people can give you their resume or their data and say, "Hey, think about me next time a position opens up," or a recruiting event where you invite people into a recruiting event and they register, you get their data, right? So all of these ways to centralize the data and then watch it grow.
Yeah, and I would add, Stephen, that this comes from sort of traditional marketing automation and sales and marketing approach to acquiring prospective customers. All these types of centralizing and maximizing all your relationships. It's been stuff that sales and marketing groups have been doing for many, many years. So a lot of the stuff that we're talking about sort of has been proven in other industries and other sort of professions.
I think that's a really good point, Ian. And I think when I think about that from an enterprise perspective, and that's my background is enterprise recruitment management. We tend to recruiters tend to look for the needle in the haystack to fill a specific open position, and then they go back and they have to do it again. And they have so many open positions, it's hard for them to think strategically. So to your point, Ian, this almost requires that we step up a level in terms of how we think strategically about our overall organization. Because an individual recruiter is not going to be tasked with building the centralized talent pool, right? You're right; it is very akin to that marketing process. So once you've got the data all in one place, now you can build pipelines. So this is, call it what you want. You can, if you're in marketing, you typically will call it market segmentation, right? Which sounds like a whole lot more fancy word than pipeline. Some tools will just call these building lists, right? Action, short lists, action lists, target lists, right? We typically just use the term pipeline because I think we all understand what that means. So from the same big database, you're going to be able to build pipelines for things like skilled nursing, home health, physician, technology, human resources, and it's all the same database, but because your CRM tool has the ability to intelligently segment that database, you can now cut this database into these pipelines, right? So your pipelines are, represented here, along the axis on the left, and across the top, you can start to see what activities are your pipelines engaged in. So how many new people are in the pipeline because maybe they just came and added their resume to your talent network 5 seconds ago, right? How many have been reviewed because your recruiters went into a pipeline folder and actually looked at the resume to determine whether or not it was even remotely a fit, right? How many of them have received emails from your system? How many have received a follow-up email or a follow-up phone call? How many of them have been shortlisted for a specific opening that is currently on the horizon? And then finally, how many have actually been invited to apply for a specific open position? Now, this is just an example of the kind of pipeline workflow that you might be able to set up within your organization to track the activity across the segmented pipelines that you create, right? And those pipelines might be specific job families like we have represented here. You can actually create shortlist pipelines for a specific job opening. Some clients will do pipelines for what they would call an evergreen job, for those of you who understand what that is, where they have one job that's open all the time, but underneath that in their ATS, they're continually open up roles, so they're pipelining into that evergreen role and then hiring into the new role that gets opened up. Sometimes they'll do pipelines by locations, particularly hospitals that have a lot of clinics throughout the community can do pipelining by zip code, etc. Right? And then you're tracking here what we call pre-application stages. But frankly, you should also then be able to track your post-application stages in your CRM, so if you've generated an invite to apply, did that person get an interview? Right? So this is building pipelines and sort of managing that.
And part of that, which we've maybe not hit hard enough, is that whatever technology you're using for your CRM, it's really important that it integrates with your ATS. So you're really dealing with the same data set. You have sort of the core is what's happening in your ATS by candidate applicants, by stages within the ATS, and then you're sort of adding to that core by the candidates that you bring in through other methodologies that maybe not have applied directly into your ATS. So integration is a real strong point in terms of success there, and getting an overview, sort of cradle to, I shouldn't say cradle to grave, that's probably the wrong analogy, but from initial interest all the way through to hired employee.
Yeah, absolutely, and it goes back to your comparison with marketing, right? So if you have a marketing system that's developing leads, you want to make sure that it goes all the way through, and if somebody's in opportunity stage and are actually working with one of your sales execs, or maybe even already is on a contract, so you have a visibility to that entire full cycle of that. In our case, what we're talking about here, a candidate life cycle, candidate and applicant life cycle, right? Now, once you've built those pipelines, then you want to engage the talent, right? It's not enough just to let them sit in the database, right, and hope that somehow by osmosis they turn into applicants. So you need a way to be able to engage your talent. Now, typically this is through email or SMS text, across probably multiple touch points, right? As you get into this, you're going to understand, does somebody apply to a job based on one email? Do they do it based on 3 emails? Does it take 7 emails? In marketing and sales, you understand that it typically takes several touch points before there's ever an interest there. So you begin to engage your talent, and maybe you're not asking them to apply for a job right away, but you're just saying, hey, we've got your information, we're happy you might be interested. Or if you have their information passively because you pulled it off of a third-party data site, maybe you send a warm-up email that says, hey, we found you at Graceworks Hospital, and we'd love to know more about you. Here's a link to join our talent network and tell us a little bit more about yourself. We'll tell you more about ourselves, and let's see if there's some interest moving forward, right? So you want to be able to send warm up emails as a beginning to build that relationship. Maybe you want to send them targeted jobs. Maybe you just want to send them information about your organization. Maybe something just happened in the organization. You just bought another new hospital and you want to make an announcement about that. So you can send an email out to folks, and maybe there's not a call to action there other than to come and read some more information. But you want to be relevant to your candidates. I've been doing recruitment operations for over 10 years, and I get an email about once a week to become a Taleo admin. Now, 15 years ago, I would have enjoyed that job. Now I do other things, right? So what that tells me is that people are using a tool that's not able to segment well enough to who I am today and what my interests are today to send me relevant information. So you want to be able to send relevant information based on the data that you already know about the candidate. And maybe if you don't have enough information, you have to send real high-level relevant information. So you might know that somebody is a nurse, but you don't know whether they have an LPN or RN. Well, that's okay. So you send an email out and say, hey, we're really impressed with your background. We'd like to learn a little bit more. Here's a link to use your LinkedIn profile to join our talent network. And on the way in, you capture whether or not they have an RN or an LPN, so you know what specific jobs to target later on. So you want to engage your talent. And then you want to source that talent. So, this is kind of an odd term because you're sort of doing this all along, right? So you may be sourcing them up front to send engagement campaigns, and then once you know more about them, you want to be able to identify the ones who now are most mature in your database, right? Who you have most information on to be able to track to a specific job, and you have a good comfort level, are going to be interested in you. Now you can source that mature database and invite them to apply for a specific job. So you run another search in your system, only this time you have more data, right? So you're searching more targeted. The results would come back if you have a CRM tool that can bring results back in an ordered or ranked fashion. And you might end up, this would be everybody's greatest joy, right, to end up with too many applicants in that list. And so maybe you take the top 50 and send an email out, right? Most of the time, we don't even have enough. But you send that email out and you invite them to apply for a specific role.
And then the goal there is making that talent pool that, as Steven says, every day is part of your process. Is you're building this talent pool, you're interacting with this talent pool, so that when new recs open, you kind of have that ready source to tap, and you're not starting from zero. You're starting from well down the road, and you make that proprietary talent pool your primary source of hire by everything that you do in terms of day-to-day recruiting. You're growing it, you're understanding it more, and it becomes that number one resource for you every time a rec opens.
Now, I don't know, I was just listening to you, Ian, and I thought, my goodness, that's a lot of work. And I can't imagine adding, that much more work onto a recruiter or recruitment marketer's, day. And thought, there's got to be an easier way. And so you want to make sure that your source and CRM tool, that tool that you're using to source and to market these jobs to, has some automation attached to it. So everything we've spoken about so far in terms of searching and sourcing and sending out email campaigns and segmenting your database and tagging them, etc., can all be automated across that cycle. And so by using automated search, by using automated segmentation, by using automated emails, certainly you're not going to do away with your recruiter, but what you're going to do is create an environment where your recruiter can come in and really work the last mile, as it were, the additional value added activity so that they're not starting from scratch every time they come into an open role. And so you want to be able to save searches, run them automatically, have the system segment automatically based upon the search results, and even send automated communications so that you get that pipeline process flowing in a much more dynamic way.
Yeah, you can really take what is kind of a big cultural leap for a lot of recruiting organizations where they're not staffed and nor sort of inclined towards that outbound, hunting for candidates, especially in mass. And you can automate most of that process, if not all of that process, in terms of letting the system do the work for you, in terms of going out and grabbing lists of candidates automatically all the time, or based on specific recs when they open up. So that's a huge point, because as we know, technology doesn't always get you over that cultural hump of changing the way that you're doing things. So in this case, it definitely can. So we look at the last piece of it here, is the analysis and the optimization. So we touched on it a little bit, kind of talking about the tools and the processes to support more proactive strategies, and kind of the structure of having sort of a structure of a centralized database in place. Then comes the great part, which is, as you're doing this work and as you're recruiting in this way proactively, you're gathering data about what's working and what's not. So when you start to think about analyzing and optimizing what you're doing as a recruiting organization, we kind of break it into three buckets. First is the data bucket, right? So you're getting these candidate profiles, you're growing your talent pool, and you need to kind of ensure that you have enough of the right kind of candidate data for sourcing, right? So it's not going to do you a lot of good to have a lot of names, phone numbers, emails, and maybe a broad, indication of what their career interest is. You really want to get as much of the resume into that talent pool as you possibly can, in a structured way that you can search on it. So that's qualifications, that's experience. You really want to make sure that that data is optimized so that it's useful for you as an organization. And obviously, we talked about organizing it. A big, unorganized blob of candidate resumes really is not that helpful for you. But as you have seen, beginning to organize it by not only pipelines but stages, it allows you to put some structure around that and really take advantage of it. The second big optimization and analysis portion is programs. So as recruiters are running through programs, approaching, engaging candidates, whether that's on a campaign basis or whether that's on a one-to-one outreach basis, really monitor that sourcing activity, make sure that it's a high enough level of activity to meet your hiring goals, but also to then begin to see what's working, which emails are getting opened and responded to, which campaigns are giving you the most applicants and the most hires. You can refine that over time. And again, it's all about doing more of what works and less of what doesn't work. And a structured approach like this really allows you to see that data of what is working and what's not working. Similarly, the last bucket is people. So monitoring that recruiter activity to see what your best recruiters are doing on an activity basis, whether that's programs, whether that's activity within the CRM, categorizing, tagging clients, sending out particular styles of emails with particular messages. When you see what's working there, you can begin to leverage that across your organization. And when you have an organization with every recruiter's inbox being their own talent pool, and maybe an ATS with past applicants that's very difficult to kind of get into and get what you're looking for, that you really can't optimize that environment. But once everybody has kind of a common tool that they're using, and you've got common processes around that tool, you can then see who's doing well and leverage that through training across your entire recruiting organization. So what do you look at exactly? I think we mentioned it, touched on it earlier, this talent pool. What size is it? Is it growing? At what rate is it growing? This is sort of the big end of the funnel in terms of working big to small. Do you have a large enough talent pool? Is it growing at the appropriate rate? Then you take it a step down further within individual pipelines. Where are your biggest hiring needs going to be? Are the size of the pipelines for those job families large enough to support what you need? And what's your rate of conversion? So you've got all your pre-applicant candidates in a centralized database. You can start to see how many of them convert to hires over time, and get a sense of at what rate your talent pool converts to applicants, which is a great number to have, because it then puts you in a position to then predict your ability to meet hiring demand. And as we saw at the front end of this presentation, hiring demand is going up. So predictability, very important. Similarly, when you're looking at your talent pool, understanding where the people in that talent pool came from. What are your top sources of candidates? And then by source, which are getting hired at the highest rate. So are your candidates that come through job board ads getting hired at a higher rate than the candidates that you've gone out and particularly searched for and sourced from other resume databases, LinkedIn, your internal talent pool? Knowing those numbers is very important. Again, it's all about doing more of what works and less of what doesn't work. Similarly, your most effective programs. So which campaigns, for all the people in your talent pool, which campaigns, whether they be events, whether they be email campaigns, social recruiting campaigns, which ones that are in your database are converting to applicants and hires at the highest rate? Again, more of what works, less of what doesn't work. And then finally, who are your most effective recruiters? What are they doing? We touched on that before. Really learning from people out there and understanding, what are recruiters doing? Are they adopting the technology? Are they adopting the processes? It's very important as you're changing your approach to really understand, who's really thriving, who's not, and what can we learn from the people who are thriving to then help the people that aren't thriving. So as an example, as we look at predictability, let's say you've done your 2017 planning and you can see that you're going to need to hire 300 licensed vocational nurses. If you're structured in this way, it's very easy to look into your talent pool and do a quick analysis of how many candidates you have in that particular pipeline, because that's an important job family for you. And let's say you have 6,500 candidates in that pipeline. And over time, you begin to understand, well, this is for this particular pipeline, we convert about 3% of the candidates in that pipeline to hired employees over on an annual basis. You can do some quick math and understand that your hiring capability is about 185 today. So you need to get out there and run some programs and get some more LVNs into your pipeline, well ahead of the point at which it becomes a problem for the organization. So you can kind of see how this can be supremely powerful in not only your organization's ability to kind of meet demand, but also in your organization's approach to the recruiting organization as a whole becomes much more data driven. And as we talked about at the front of the presentation, there's a definite place for people with data skills and workforce planning skills in the healthcare HR profession. So having this kind of data is supremely valuable, not only to the department in terms of meeting goals, but also in terms of the department's value to the overall organization. So that when the operational group looks at recruiting and says, "Hey, can we do this?" you can say with confidence and back up, "Yes, we can do this," or we're going to have some challenges in doing this, and I need these resources to meet that challenge. Very, very powerful shift in organizations happen when they take this approach in terms of recruiting's value to the overall organization. So just to kind of cap it off here and kind of talking about new strategies, we have a case study that's available at telemetry.com. And this is one of our clients, University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, which is a large health system, the largest employer in Pennsylvania, the largest non-government employer in Pennsylvania, who came to us a couple of years ago with similar goals in mind. They had sort of multiple locations, a sort of dispersed recruiting organization where different recruiting groups were working for different, working to fill the needs of different locations, as well as candidate facing. They had an inconsistent brand across their multiple locations and multiple units, and they wanted to kind of can make their brand more consistent from a candidate facing standpoint. And they worked with telemetry to support this in terms of technology to support it. And they consolidated all their past applicants from their ATS. They plugged into all their external resume databases and sources for actively outbound sourcing candidates, as well as internal candidates as well from employees, and then shared that talent pool across every member of the recruiting organization. Um, and and from a candidate facing standpoint, they used our candidate experience platform to implement a very consistent brand across all their locations, as well as to create multiple career pathways within their career site. So it's not a one size fits all sort of online experience. So there's multiple different pathways, everything from skilled nursing to service workers to professionals and administration, physicians, of course. So multiple different microsites that candidates are funneled to from the front page to really give them a more targeted experience. You know, content and jobs that are really relevant to each professional group, because it's not a one size all fit situation. And they've created a fantastic candidate facing career site. And they've sort of standardized their recruiting processes by giving similar tools to all their recruiters. And they're using the analytics that come out of this to identify bottlenecks, identify areas to improve, and get into a mode where they can continuously improve on all of their recruiting operations. So I think we'll include this case study to anybody who's on the call here with the follow-up email, which will include the case study, the slides, and most likely a recording of this presentation so you can watch it again. So with that, we thought, well, let's take a look at some of the technology behind all of these strategies that can help support that. So Stephen, you're going to give us a quick overview of kind of telemetry, how it looks, etc. So let me make you the presenter here.
Okay. Let me know when that refreshes.
Yep.
Excellent. So I didn't want to walk you through any of our client sites. So what I did is I spun up a typical, what I'd like to call a microsite. Some might call it a landing page, depending upon how big it is. If it's a single page in a larger career site that has dedicated content, then it might just be a landing page. But sometimes you want a full microsite, even if it's just 4 or 5 pages big, to be able to deliver out targeted communications. So let's start taking a look at what some of these things look like first of all, from a front end perspective, right? As you are working in the healthcare, there are several different professions that are represented in healthcare. So of course, physicians and nurses being the obvious ones, but you've got finance and human resources and service jobs, etc. And if you think about the different messaging that's required across all of those different areas, microsites is a really handy way to start, creating targeted communications and begin to tailor that message right from the front. So, this is an example, real quickly, of a nice microsite that's fully branded. I have a fake healthcare company here I call Black Bear Health. It's branded to that company. In this case, it's just oriented toward nurses. So it's a landing page for nurses. And in that landing page for nurses, I'm going to tell them specifically about what, how much we care about nurses at our organization. In this area, I might, create some videos that tell them a little bit more about what it's like to work in my organization. And then, as always, we want to create, give them jobs. And if they're ready to apply, why make them go look for something? So let's give them jobs right away. So I've got all jobs that are specific nursing jobs in my organization in different locations here. But here's the key to kind of building that talent network is I'm giving them an alternate call to action. I'm about to click a button here, and this button I could actually put into an email rather than drop them on a talent network. Just put this button into an email that says, hey, I'd love to hear more about you. Why don't you come in and join our talent network? So, if it's going to be mobile capable, then I want to be able to give them options to use things like Indeed, Dropbox, Google Drive, OneDrive, etc. If they're sitting on their desktop, they may actually have a resume. So, if we come in and select a resume from our downloads here, let's just select Nurse Kelly here. And as Ian said earlier, you don't want just a first name, last name, and email address. You want to know a little bit more about them because the resume is going to tell you if they've worked in hospitals that are similar to yours, if they have experience working with the same types of populations that you work with, in addition to just raw qualifications. So here we've parsed all of her address, her contact information. We're going to have her work history is in here as well. And as she continues, we've got education history, and then we may want to ask some very specific questions so that we can do that segmentation we talked about earlier. So, do you have an RN or an LPN? Yeah, yes, I have an RN. Yes, no. Yes, I have more than 6 years experience, and you know what? I actually work, mostly with oncology and folks my age and older, right? So what's your primary specialty is a quick selection, and they may have multiples, so that you can then segment based on multiples, and you submit that. And now what you've done in a very quick way for one targeted person is brought them into your talent community. You've collected enough data on them, both from their resume perspective and a couple of quick questions, to be able to target very specific information to them. And you may not want to send them jobs right away. You might want to send them an email that says something like this. We were happy to hear about you, and we've got your information online. We'd like to learn more, and give them a link back out to another application form if they hadn't actually completed the first one to begin with, right? So you send that out to them. Another option one of our clients is using is more of an event-focused approach, where they actually set up events on a weekly or monthly basis, and as people come and learn about the event, they're using that same technology to register for that event. So again, asking people to upload a resume, ask a couple of questions, and have enough information so that when the data comes into their talent network, they can actually segment that and push that forward, right? So I thought it was worthwhile starting from what a solution could look like on the very front end at the beginning of the process. Okay. And Ian, I'm just going to ask you, are you seeing my screen okay?
Yep, seeing it fine.
Yeah, okay. All right, there was one question with somebody who couldn't, so I just want to make sure that it was there. Excellent. So that's what it looks like sort of from a front-end perspective. Now, once you get into the system, how is your data segmented and organized? So in telemetry, we talk about organizing data in several ways. Remember, I said some companies talk about lists, and some talk about pipelines, and we've got folders, and we've got talent networks, and we've got jobs. So in this case, people are joining my talent network, and when they join a talent network, they're sitting right here in my talent network. So I have a specific talent network for healthcare nurses, right? And here's all 4 people that have joined my talent network in the past couple of days here. And as we jump into each of those profiles, you can see I've got enough information in here to know, what their work history is, if they've got a resume, that would be sitting here. This person actually logged in manually. But it's a very simple way to come in and check out who you've got in the system. We talked earlier about running searches and filters and managing all of that. So as you're asking questions, again, does your system have the capability then to come in and filter on very specific information? So if you're looking for information on nurse type, so here's a question on what types of nursing backgrounds do you have, right? And I can come in here and I can select the value that I'm looking to create a segmentation based on. So based on the filter, I can create that search, and as I bring back all of the results from that search, it's very easy for me then to say, well, yep, I'm happy with all of these folks. They're nurses. They have the RN that I'm looking for, and I can send a mass email to 5 or up to 5,000 people in a very simple way, just by simply selecting a branded email template here. So I know I've got one not for my healthcare company, but for my Black Bear company overall, and it's going to send out a nicely branded email. I can attach a specific job to that email. So if I have a job, I don't know if I accept, maybe it's a head nurse in Arizona. and I want to add that job to the email campaign. Now I'm going to see an email that sends out a personalized email campaign that tells them a little bit of information about my organization, about myself, shows them, where the position is that I'm hiring for, and what the title is of the position, and most importantly, gives them a direct link to go apply for that job if they're interested. Or maybe they're just interested in learning more about our organization, so I create also a link here so that they can come and look at my career site. Now, the reason I would do that is because I want to be able to track the progress and the success of my email campaign. And so if they're not interested in applying for a job, they might just close it out. But they might have gone to my career site on their own, and I can't track that. So I put the URL in the email. Now I can track that activity as well, and it tells me that this nurse is certainly interested in learning more. So maybe I'm going to keep her warm in my talent network. So that's a little bit about kind of what it's like to go into a system and search for for data. In fact, just to show you how that works, I'm going to search for some more data. I don't have a lot of healthcare data in my specific demo system, so let's just look for a software engineer. And as I begin to search this pool, now remember, I've already built the pool. I've got 97,000 candidates in my pool, but I want to search them. So as I type ahead, I'm just going to select the title that is recommended to me as software engineer. I'm looking for somebody actually maybe within 30 miles radius of Chicago, Illinois. So I'm going to put the location in. I'm going to increase the radius here. And then I'm going to tell the system to look for somebody who has Java. And again, the system gives me that type ahead capability. I can make Java a required keyword. I can also say, listen, I know that there are some related keywords to Java. The system already has them categorized, so I can cherry pick them, or I can just say add them all. And now I've got a much broader and more targeted search mechanism. So I remember the manager said, yeah, we definitely need somebody that's got Java virtual machine, so we might make that required, or we might change it, just make it nice to have versus the other ones that are important. And based on that, we're going to bring back data from two sources. Number one, our internal source, all of our past applicants, people we've been building up, that 97,000 people I already have in my database. Plus, if I have licenses to third-party databases, I might want to search a few of those as well. So I'll just search beyond for this. And now I'm running a real-time search, not only to the data that I already own, but also the data that I don't own yet, right? So you can imagine what this would be like if you had data access to some third-party databases for nurses or healthcare workers, etc. In addition to the past applicants that you have, all of that data would come back. You'd be able to really quickly see who's the strongest the strongest matches here. You could do some quick things like let's just say let's work with 200 people at a time. Because I'm really trying to build a larger pipeline here, so I'm just going to change the view to show me the top 200. And based upon my search, I might come all the way down here to the bottom and say, yeah, I'm pretty happy with the person that's all the way down at the bottom here. My go-to is in my way. I'm sorry about that. I can't get go-to out of my way. I might come all the way down to the bottom and say, yep, this looks like a pretty good match, so I'm happy with all 200 at this point. So in this case, I'm going to select all 200, and I'm going to send them. I'm going to do something with these folks. So I'm going to create my haystack or my pipeline. And so in one fell swoop, I can say, let's put them into a specific folder, right? So that I can start to work with them on a more focused basis, mature the data. So I just come in and I'm going to change it, put them in one of my saved folders, right? So I got a folder here named Steven because I am so incredibly creative, and now I've in real time manually done all of that. But the beauty here, as we said earlier, is as you start doing this, you want to automate as much of that process as possible. So I can already tell that my first search came back 200, and I was very happy with them. So I must be pretty happy with this overall search, right? So I'm happy with the radius and the keywords. Maybe I want some filters down here for age of resume or years of experience, right? So I'm pretty happy with this. I'm going to not only save this search, but I'm going to actually make this an auto search, right? So I'm going to make it a new auto Java search, just as a how you like that for a name, right? So by saving that search, I can now tell the system what to do with the results of this search. So I can say every time you bring back results, because it's going to run once a day, I want you to add them to my favorite folder. Right? So here's my favorite folder. Yep, that's it. Put all the results in that folder. And oh, by the way, when you do, add a couple of tags to them. Like let's add a tag that says auto search. If I could type and talk at the same time, you would see that I already have one there. Let's add a search a tag that says auto search, so I know when I see this person elsewhere in the system that I brought them in as a result of an auto search. And let's just give them a tag of Java just for the sake of argument, right? And maybe let's add a note, right? Demo download. And just this way, I know that these are in the system because I was doing a demo. So this note's going to be added to everybody who comes in, and I'm going to tell the system where to search for people. So I might say, just search candidate data I already own, or let's go out and pay for some data and bring some new data in, and let's do this for the next 2 weeks, right? So you get the idea. All of that can be automated, and then once it ends up in my folder, I could do some additional automation. So I can decide on a pipeline folder. Let's say here's my Steven pipeline folder that I mentioned before. And I can decide when people are in this folder, then let's automatically email them. Maybe as soon as I put them in the folder, a warm-up email, or maybe down at the very end of the process when I'm ready to invite them to apply for a job, let's send them an invite. And let's have that email come out from either myself or somebody else I'm supporting as a sourcer. Let's select the specific email template that we're going to use, and which job do we want them to apply for. Let's make them apply for the Cloud DBA role, and then they're going to be attached to that role when I send this out. So you can see the automation, so that if I'm working in my folder with Jack here, and I'm pretty happy with Jack, let's say he's pretty new down here, and I'm happy with them. As soon as I move them up to invite to apply, the system will send that email out automatically, and I don't have to do anything. So it allows me as a recruiter to spend my time, doing higher value activities rather than more menial tasks like sending out emails, etc. So hopefully that gives you just a little bit of a taste of what it might be like to start to build, number one, a proactive sourcing mechanism for your recruiting needs, and then number two, begin to automate that so that you can optimize what's happening downstream in your system. So I know that's really high level, but hopefully it starts to help you understand how you can start to use tools and platforms to start doing the things that Ian and I were talking about earlier in terms of recruitment marketing and sourcing for your recruiting needs.
Thank you, Stephen. That was a great overview. Obviously, fairly quick, and we are heading towards the end of our time. But I just want to let you know that in addition to the slides, which will come out to you, in addition to the case study that I talked about and the recording, we're going to give you a free handbook, which is called Predictable Hiring, which really goes into depth about how to develop these strategies and structure your own organization. To take advantage of this more proactive recruiting approach. And of course, if you want to learn more about telemetry, you can visit us at telemetry.com. You can reach out to me directly if you have individual questions, and you can learn more about telemetry through our main social sources there. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. I hope that you found this helpful. We've had a great time presenting it, and I hope you all have a great day. Thank you.